life and Korean wedding, the latter of which I'm assuming involves Koreans and a wedding. See, we have Benson Lee next to him, and he does it all as well. Producer, writer, director, editor. Apparently you cater your own craft services, if I have to He's best known for the documentary Planet B-Boy, which he then adapted into the narrative version, Battle of the Year, The Dream Team, and is currently in pre-production on Soul Searching, a summer camp tale set in 1986, which raises the obvious question of how many Erasure and New Order songs are you trying to license for your time?
A lot.
And then last but not least, we have Parry Shen, whose Asian American graphic novel anthology Shattered is a big reason why today's conference even exists. Parry was one of the lead actors in the groundbreaking 2002 film Better Luck Tomorrow, has edited both Shattered and its prequel, Secret Identities, and recently wrote his first screenplay for the forthcoming feature film Unidentified, currently in post-production. So big hand for the panel. So the first question I have is for all of you, and we'll start from Chris and just work down the line, which is we're here to talk about strategies for the future of Asian American cultural production, image making, etc. And certainly we're going to get to those specific strategies. But I wanted to start by asking, in terms of your own sort of life story, how did each of you end up pursuing careers in some form of creative work, and what were sort of the key paths that you followed along the way? Were these long-term ambitions something that you sort of accidentally fell into? But sort of tell us, how did you get into where you are now? And we'll start with Chris.
Wow, me first. By accident for me. I grew up in the Bay Area. I was in tech during the first wave, so it was a fun time there. I accidentally got into entertainment because I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity after an exit from a tech company. So that started 12 years ago, and I've always been passionate about media and entertainment, and specifically on the Asian American side. I'm going to date myself, but when I grew up, it was Long Duck Dong and that type of stuff, and that was not something that I was proud of or was I had identity issues, right? With am I Asian, am I white? So I think obviously after the last 10, 12 years, just some of the stuff that I've worked on, try to portray Asians in a different light. Certainly, if I can do that in my day job, that's all the helpful. I have the claim to fame of doing 2 documentaries on Chinese guys from the Houston Rockets. So, so that's one thing. But we've also done Harold and Kumar, and we financed that, and we've been very active in Asia. So, trying to do my part.
I decided to pursue a life in the creative arts because I was a horrible student. Basically just growing up, instead of doing my homework, all I did was write and draw. And so, I decided to drop out of college and move out west, threw everything in my car. You wanted to be in the movie business, wanted to write, but didn't know anybody in LA, didn't know anybody in the business, didn't know how to get a job in the business. So when I got here, the very first job I got was working at a Blockbuster Video. And so I was there for about 3 months when one day Owen Wilson walks in, and he comes up to me. He's like, I'm looking for 2 movies, The Producers and Smoke. I said, okay, well, Producers in comedy, throw it out next to so-and-so, Smoke's over there in drama next to so-and-so. And Owen gives me like this really curious look. He's like, how'd you know off the top of your head like that? I said, I have good mind for titles and names and concepts. He goes, oh, interesting. So he walks away, gets his movies, comes back to me. He's like, are you interested in filmmaking? I was like, well, I just moved here. I want to write. He goes, interesting. And that's all we talked about. He leaves. Literally the next day, he calls me at Blockbuster. He goes, do you want to work for me? And so I basically quit Blockbuster. I worked for him and Wes Anderson and Luke Wilson for 3 years. I typed up the Royal Tenenbaum script because they wrote everything in longhand. Owen Wilson did Shanghai Noon because I lobbied for it. And then I parted ways because eventually I sold a script, and then I met Tyrese, and I started running his company, and that's how he's a producer in K-Town and stuff like that. So
I'm glad I'm not following him.
Yeah, right? I was a Korean model, and Russell Simmons saw me on the runway, and no. Okay. Man. Ever since I was a little kid, I'm Kate Rigg, everybody. Hi, nice to see you. Been having a good time for the short time I've been here. I grew up always writing, always acting, making people laugh, doing sketches, doing stuff in high school, getting involved in stuff. So I went to school for these things under much duress and conversation and fighting with my parents, who of course wanted me to go to medical school, big surprise. And actually to this day, my mom, in fact this morning, just called me and said, not too late for medical school, we'll still pay. So that's my life. So I went to school undergrad for creative writing and subcultures, which was a area that I was interested in, sort of anthropology, cultural anthropology, to inform my writing. And then I went to grad school at the Juilliard School in New York as an actor. So that was just me getting educated in the things that I liked. The way my creative career started was that I had a lot of opportunities when I was living in Australia for my undergrad degree to go to drama school there too. And this is relevant, and I'll get to the point quickly. I didn't stay in Australia because I didn't want my acting career to be first Asian ever to do a Shakespeare role, first Asian ever to do, a Tennessee Williams or whatever, because that's what it would have been like at the time when I was in Australia. So I thought, I'll move to New York, where it's way more multicultural, and my life will be totally different. And of course, I got politicized when I was in school, and I was learning about cultural and arts, and I ended up, ironically, producing shows like one called Birth of a Nation, and Asian. One called Kate's Chinkarama, featuring the Chinkarama dancers, which was all about subverting stereotypes in Asian America, and that was a comedy show. Anyways, I ended up doing all this politicized work. I did a oral history project called the Urban Tao, which is ongoing, and I ended up actually, sort of splitting my time between mainstream work and like Law and Order or Family Guy or whatever it is I was doing, and doing these really focused Asian American API specific works, which took me on the road to colleges and took me into the stand-up scene, which took me to places like the Dr. Phil show, speaking on comedy panels about what it is to be Asian in America and what stereotypes are, which took me into the spoken word and hip hop world with my band, Slanty-Eyed Mama, which took me to the Smithsonian Institute and the Comedy Central Theater, which just all along the way you meet people, and like in your case, I just started collaborating, and so what has come out of this after, about 10 years working, 15 years, 100 years working since graduation, was that I started to realize that the impact that I wanted to have was kinda full circle, being the first Asian American, creator of a cheesy dance reality show. Do you know what I'm saying? Being one of the few, anyways, Asian American creators of reality TV. The first Asian American woman to get a show on network television in Canada that's about geocaching for kids, taking a really nerdy thing, which is my métier, and making it cool and fun. So I just kind of came full circle after sort of putting myself out there and training in the sort of non-Asian and Western-based arts. I'm coming back to those things with this perspective.
Wow, you guys kick ass. I'm going to apologize in advance because I made the mistake of going out for one drink last night with my friends. Of course, blew my voice out and got home at 5 o'clock.
And he's still red.
I'm going to really date myself, but Asian representation in television was David Carradine when I was growing up. So, we've come a long way from where we were. We have a long ways to go. I got into this because I was a lawyer. I had friends who couldn't get an agent, couldn't get a manager, couldn't get a lawyer, couldn't do anything. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to sell a big movie to a studio. It was a big active spec market at the time. And then that kind of got me into the business. I'm a second generation Asian American. I was born in Seattle. And I didn't really find my way back to the Asian community for a long time. The first time I visited Korea was probably when I was in my 20s. And now I've spent the last 8 years of my life working for a Korean company who really I started working with them because the mission was really to look for a way to find a voice for Asian Americans and to make sure that Asian Americana was woven into American pop culture in a meaningful way. So that's why we started into this. The way I got into this and what really kind of set me into this business is that after we'd sold that big spec, you know, I had a lot of really talented friends who had all these great Asian American stories to tell, and we'd go into studios, and they'd look at us and say, you know, here's the problem, Asians don't go to the movies, right? And no kids here, right? And I was like, that's bullshit, come on, there's no way you can say that. And really what they're saying is that we're so acculturated that they don't target us because they don't need to target us. If we speak English, we consume like everybody else. So, you know, to go from, and back then, I had a lot of clients who were African-American writers and directors, and they would always complain about the fact that they could only get 5 or 6 black movies made a year, right? And there's like, how many Asian movies, how many Asian American movies have been made over the last 10 years? I mean, we can count them on our hands, right? So that really pissed me off, and that set me into motion. And that's why I turned myself into figuring out a way that we can make sure that from a business standpoint, that Asian Americans are represented in the media.
So as a director, I've always loved movies from when I was a kid, but I never thought I could become a filmmaker. And I went to NYU, which is one of the best film schools, but I didn't study movies. But I did help my roommate, who was a film student. And I got the bug just helping him make movies, but unfortunately, I failed out at NYU. So I moved to Hawaii, where I went to the University of Hawaii, and I made the commitment there to actually become a filmmaker. And I made movies on my own. And after that, I went to Europe, and I lived in France and England, and tried to learn about filmmaking there by working in the industry. But that's where I made my first movie, and it was called Miss Monday, and I got that into the Sundance Film Festival. So when I got to Sundance, it was a great experience, and I met some journalists from Korea, and they were asking me, you know, my film took place in the UK, and all my cast was English, and the journalist asked me, you know, why aren't there any Koreans in this, or any Asians in your movie? And I was like, well, it's not about that. I mean, it's just the story that took place in the UK. And he goes, well, you ever make movies about Asians? And at that point, you know, I didn't really think about it, because I didn't become a filmmaker to express my personal story. But he definitely got me thinking. And so after Sundance, I wrote this script called Soul Searching. And that was back in 1999. And it's a romantic teen comedy about, based on a true story. When I went to Korea during the summer, my parents forced me to go to this special summer camp, and where we were supposed to learn about our Korean heritage, but it turned out to be like Porky's. And, and I met all these Koreans from around the world, like Germans and Brazilians, and I had no idea that they existed in other countries. And it was an amazing experience, because we learned what it meant to be bicultural and the importance of that. And that was actually a very profound experience in my life, because I accepted myself as a Korean American. I never had any issues after that. I realized that Korean American is actually an identity in and of itself. But at the time after I wrote the script, I tried to get it made, and nobody was interested. I went to Korea, and I went to the Busan Film Festival, and nobody was interested. Even Koreans. So here I am, like almost 14 years later, and I've never given up on this script, but this is a different time that we're living in. Korea has definitely come up for several reasons, either through K-pop or Psy. Asian American roles have changed significantly in the media. There's more people making decisions now, and I personally believe that I don't feel it's my obligation. I feel it's sort of my duty to tell a great story, and that hopefully, you know, and with Asian American characters that have depth, that offer characters who are not the stereotypes. Because even up to this day, I mean, you know, he mentioned Long Duck Dong, and you know, a lot of us older cats have been definitely affected by that. But you know, every generation has a Long Duck Dong, and we still see it up until this day. And what I realize is I can never expect the media to make a difference, but I can expect Asian Americans in the media to do that. So I feel like that's my role in this film. But number one, I want to make a great movie, and number two, I want to give more opportunities for Asian American actors.
What? I don't understand. I forgot the I can't figure out what the question is.
Basically, how did you get to where you are now? What was your pathway into as an author, as an editor, et cetera?
Oh,
Here, use this one.
Okay. I wanted to be a writer since I was very young, and I went to, like, I think a lot like Mike, I was a very bad student, and I'm like pretty unemployable, and so like I didn't have any other options. Like after college, I went to MFA program, and I was in a lot of debt after that, and I didn't have much like motivation. I didn't think that having a professional writing career was something that was worth aspiring to. And then I ran out of like unemployment, and then I'm not trying to be coy here, but like that's sort of what it was. It was just sort of a sense of desperation where I was like 29, and I was like, well, if I don't get something done right now, like it's gonna get really sad really quickly. So I sent some stuff out on the internet, and like some websites that I liked, and then I went and traveled in Southeast Asia for a while, and then I was like in Cambodia, and then I got all these phone calls at once, and it was just like a lot of opportunities opened up, I guess.
This was based off of your blog post, the free article stuff that you did.
No, this is like, I had like this really, I mean, a lot of my 20s was spent playing poker, so I wrote something about like losing like $30,000 at the Commerce Casino, and
read that one.
yeah. And then I thought it would be funny to try and make this like statistical argument that Whitney Houston was better singer than Aretha Franklin, which I thought was like controversial to say. And then when I was in Cambodia, like I got a call from the New York Times Magazine asking me to do some pieces for them. And then Bill emailed me. Bill Simmons emailed me about the Aretha Franklin piece. He was like, this is exactly what I want. So like that was all on the same day. It was interesting. I was in Angkor Wat. It was on the same day. So after that, it was like, and my novel sold around the same time. So like it was like within a week everything happened. It's still very weird to me. So like that was, I don't know. After that, it's just been like work. So, yeah.
I'm at a table. Let's see. Crash course. Basically, I think it all boils down to that my parents got divorced. So my mom was working a lot of jobs, so she wasn't home a lot. So I was essentially raised by the television. So that's where I got a lot of my kind of like storytelling know-how and narrative, and it's very much geared towards film and television. And it sort of seeped into the way that I would like play with my action figures. Like everyone would want to play with me when I was playing G.I. Joes, because I had like a 3-act story all the time. Like they'd first, show the hero moments, show how good they were and all their abilities, saving the day. And then the second act, something bad happens. Lady J gets kidnapped, and you're like, oh no, we have to go get her back. And then at the end, the third act, they go beyond all the odds and then grab her and then take her back, and she's safe, and everything is fine. So that sort of was, I always had sort of that sort of instinct, getting the beats of a joke during Three's Company when Jack Tripper would go, coffee, tea, and I would go, oh wait, in my head, this last part is going to be funny, the funny part, and I didn't know that was the beats of a joke come in threes. All that time just absorbing stuff through film and television growing up, and then when I was in college, or high school, though I was never in any of the school productions. I was kind of just watching my friends. Even though I wanted to be on stage, I would be the reporter reporting about it just so that I would get, tickets to see the production. And I think in hindsight, it was that I never really saw anybody that was, that was Asian. None of my acting heroes were really, there were really no idols or, people, mentors that I could look towards to be like, this guy made a career out of it, and is doing fine. And so I think that sort of hampered me. To sort of pursue it during college, but then when I was on my way to be an accountant, and I was doing an internship, and I was watching everyone going to work on the New York subway, and everyone looked like this. Like nobody looked like they were happy where they were going at all, and that's when I decided after I graduated that I would come out and treat it like a business plan and get training. and just start auditioning and just treat it, if I'm a product, I'm gonna have to make myself the best product as possible. Got, auditions and then booked a couple roles, and then led to Better Luck Tomorrow, and which was sort of groundbreaking with the first feature to have all Asian American leads in it. And it was just kind of cool. All of a sudden, this stuff was sort of like thrust upon you to sort of like, hey, okay, what are you guys gonna do next? And to this day, it's kind of cool that the people that I audition against now got into the business because they saw Better Luck Tomorrow. I mean, they're making me unemployed now, but it's good in the grand scheme of things. That it's like, wow, you guys, this would have been just this horrible cycle if BLT probably hadn't come out. You wouldn't have a lot of people who said, hey, I can do this, and saw some examples. So.
Thank you. So I have specific questions for each of you, and this sort of gets to really the meat of what hopefully this panel can get to, which is, what are the strategies that you're looking for? And I want to speak to each of your respective expertise. And actually, I'm going to start at the end with both Parry and Jay, which is, in your role as editors, you have to, in essence, identify talent. So the people that you picked out for the two anthologies, Jay, the people that you work with at Grantland. I mean, I don't think it's any one thing, but how do you figure out who you want to pick to be able to put on? What are those things, those qualities that speak to you in a way that maybe someone can take away from a kernel of knowledge from that?
With Secret Identities, the first volume was Asian American superheroes. The second volume, Shatter, is about Asian American comics with different themes of noir and horror. But something that really stood out that kind of sums up, I think, to answer your question, was we got this one submission from somebody, and it was this teenage girl who, high schooler by day, but at night she was a spy for the CIA. Okay, and she happened to be Asian, and then we're like, that's just too easy for a studio if they're going to option that, if it hits, to say, you know what, we'll option that, but we're going to change the ethnicity to Caucasian, cast Jennifer Garner, and call it Alias. Whereas we got this other great story that was about this hero from 1945. Around that area, and he basically is loved by the public, but Pearl Harbor happens, and he gets put into internment camps with all the other Japanese Americans, despite all the good that he's done and all the goodwill that the people feel for this hero. And I thought that was just so interesting, and the character had to be innately Asian American to have that perspective that wasn't seen, that couldn't be told by anybody else. And you can't make a movie by putting Tom Cruise in a Japanese American internment camp, They'll try with, Last Samurai. But that was the question when we got submissions, was like, why is this story in this anthology? It doesn't have to be something on a soapbox, but what makes it very interesting is that hero, when he gets out of the internment camps, how does that change him? Is he going to still continue fighting for his country, like a lot of people did with the 442? Or does he have a chip on his shoulder and saying, like, screw you guys, you did this to me? I mean, all of a sudden that changes that dynamics, and you can't tell that story. That comes from a very unique perspective that is innately Asian American experience. But it's still, at the same time, universal, because you have so many ethnicities that have gone through similar injustices like that.
I think it's, I mostly look over like writing on the internet, and in some ways it's all the same, in some ways it's like very different, and I think that given that everybody has blogs and Twitter now, like it's interesting to try and figure out why certain people are way more successful than other people. And I guess that was my job at the beginning of Grantland, was to try and find people who had, throughout, because we would get hundreds of submissions a day, I think we still do, and to try and figure out what people are worth sort of following up with, and because everybody at the same, everybody's writing about the same exact thing. Like if Girls had been around there, we would have gotten like 100 submissions about like the TV show Girls every single day. Like Mad Men, I guess, is what people were writing about back then, and there's this sort of like this sort of group thing on the internet where people all have to talk about the same thing. I don't quite understand why, But I guess it's just like you can tell when somebody is networking, and you can tell when somebody is an actual writer, and the vast majority of people are networking. Like I did like a tour of colleges where I talked at a lot of colleges back east, and it was shocking to me how many young people like view writing as like a networking opportunity. And I think that's almost because like, you know, I think it's sort of the ease of the internet and social media where you can believe that like if you go from point A to point B to point C, like, and it all can happen electronically, then you can have a career. You know, I don't know, like I guess in some ways like my career is an example of something like that where it could happen that way. But I don't know, I try, like there's sort of a cynicism that's built into the work when it's presented that way that's very easy to spot. And I think that like when I was trying to find writers for Grantland, the #1 thing that I looked for was like people who weren't career-oriented in that sort of way. Like if you really thought that being on Grantland would be a stepping stone to other sort of work, or if like this was a means to an end and you were doing things like writing about girls because you felt that like that was the sort of thing that we would want, then that was exactly the sort of thing that like we would reject at the beginning. But it never had anything to do with diversity. I think our staff is very diverse, and I think that it's just because the very early editorial staff was very committed to this idea that we should only have fresh voices, and like that sort of lent itself to having a lot of minority writers.
For Benson and Ted, since the two of you have extensive experience working in Asia with the entertainment industry out there, I mean, obviously it's the comparison between the Asian pop market and the Asian American pop market vastly, vastly different. I'm wondering what kind of lessons can Asian Americans learn from sort of the successes and what works in Asia? What can we learn from that, but also what doesn't work in terms of what gets lost in translation, trying to perhaps bridge stuff back to the U.S. And Benson, if you want to start.
Well, that seems like more of a question for Ted because he works in between both countries. But for myself, it's two very different media cultures. And although I am making a movie, like my next movie is going to be in Seoul, but it's a very different storytelling approach. It's a very different thematic approach, marketing approach. What I find frustrating actually is that there's so many great movies coming out of Asia, but they don't really get to be seen or distributed. So in terms of what I've learned is they are separate cultures. Like Asian America has their own thing going on. And I think one thing that we can benefit from is that Asia is now investing more in American movies and media. So as a filmmaker, I would encourage other filmmakers to think about approaching financing sources in Asia, particularly China and Korea, because there's a lot of money out there. And from what I understand, like in Korea, there's been a lot of co-productions. A lot of Korean filmmakers have been supported by Korean film companies, and I believe that's happening in China as well. So I think Asian Americans should take advantage of that.
You know, the primary thing, the real difference is that in Korea, at least, I'll speak to Korea and China, I think, to a certain extent. It's kind of like Hollywood in the 70s, right? You have directors who are auteurs, very much like the French market, where the directors control their movie from top to bottom. And really, you don't get that freedom here, I don't believe. No. So, you know, that's really the key difference in terms of process. There are also no unions in Korea, so you know, these crews are killing themselves, and they get hired to run a show, which means if the director feels like he wants to shoot 8 more months, you're on the show. No one quits because that's bad form, and then you never get to work with that particular director, that producer again. So it's a really tough environment in that sense, but it is incredibly artistically liberating. And so, I mean, the thing for us is that when we wrestle with these notions of what's the best approach to this, and the way that the studios do it is really, it's just financial modeling. I mean, it doesn't take a genius. They have this very, very extensive, complicated model, and then they just pop all the different assumptions into it, and then it kicks out a number, and that's your number. yes or no, right? It's very black or white. Whereas over in Asia, it's still very much, do I like this director? Are we committed to this? And what can we do? The other thing is that here we have a very healthy ancillary market. There's no market for home video in Korea, at least. You're talking about a country with the highest broadband penetration rate in the world and the fastest, so piracy is obviously a tremendous issue out there. There's no VOD or television market, so everything is based on what you can get by driving people to the cinema. The thing that that can't be applicable here is really in Korea, to Benson's point, there is a lot of money. There are all these global funds going out there, but there's not a lot of sophistication in terms of how they invest in movies. Here, there's some blend of equity with debt, foreign sales, and you can blend it that way and minimize your exposure. Over in Korea, we just pay for the whole thing. So there's no pre-selling of anything. It's just, hey, this movie cost $20 million, and we just cut a check and go, right? That's not going to happen here. So, you know, I mean, we're learning as we go. You know, to bring over, we also represent this director, Ji-woon Kim, who did Bittersweet Life, you know, these fantastic movies. He just did Last Stand. And what we're finding is that when the Korean directors come over here to work, they find it incredibly difficult because nobody gives them notes in Korea. And here you have everybody giving you 20 pages of notes every time you do something. So, I mean, these things
and they don't speak English.
Yeah, and they don't speak English. So you have these cultural nuances that you have to kind of navigate. But, you know, like anything else, every movie is its own animal. So you got to deal with new things all the time.
Kate, you know, besides being sort of the performer extraordinaire on the panel, you also do work and have extensive experience in basically brand strategy. Yeah. And I'm wondering to what degree, you know, is there such a thing as an Asian American brand? And if so, what is it? And I guess more importantly, how can sort of brand management, brand strategy be useful in terms of a community's long-term goals, in terms of the issues that we've been
Speaking to us as a community, you mean? Yeah. This is something that I actually talk about a lot when I go out to colleges to speak to young Asian Americans who have Asian American student associations, or even more branched off to Chinese American student associations, Taiwanese, whatever, you know, whatever the student association is, or multicultural. Like, what is the Asian American brand? I mean, could be the topic of an entire summit. So, as a, you know, I'm the opposite of a regular person. I do branding as my fun hobby, because I like the business side of art and the art side of business. And so, you know, branding is about putting out an image into the marketplace and assessing who your audience is and controlling the message that you want to send out to that audience and seeing if it works or what returns you get, right? So when you're talking about an Asian American brand, the first thing that we all have to be conscious of is that we're talking still about a diaspora of cultures in America, and because immigration is continuing and you have different generations of different cultures continuing to come in, Japanese American, Cambodian American, Indonesian American, Chinese American, each of those cultures is bringing their own cultural mores with them when they travel. And then once you get to the second or third generation of Asian American born in the country, they start looking, or we start looking, I should say, for a cultural identity that transcends our familial cultural identity and starts to link us to other Asian Americans, which is a complicated and difficult thing. It's a very long sentence. I hope that it went down okay. And which is why I have a band called Slanty-Eyed Mama, because we summarize these in spoken word rants. So when we talk about our community making strides in branding, I mean, if you think about the pillars of branding, you think about what message do you want to send, how do you want to be perceived, what things are already out in the marketplace, such as stereotypes or representations in the media. Do you agree or disagree with them, and what do you want to strengthen as an individual and as a member of a community? And I think that basically it can be boiled down at this moment in history, not forever, but at this moment in history, that this is America. We're talking about being Americans, and in America, money talks, bullshit walks, right? That's how it is. So if we, as Asian Americans, can't get behind cultural and media representation that lifts up other Asian Americans, then what the hell are we talking about? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, Benson, you were talking about being at Sundance. I was at Sundance 2 years ago with a movie that I was in. And, you know, we all feel like gladiators. I think everyone in this room feels like a gladiator. You don't know whether you're supposed to fight cultural stereotypes, lift up your community by doing acts of valor that, you know, set a good example, whether you're supposed to community bond or teach your parents to be more American. Like, what are you supposed to do, right? But I can tell you this. I was at Sundance 2 years ago. I was in a film, and I made it a point to go, money talks, bullshit walks, to the films that were directed by Asian Americans, like to lay down my money and go sit in the auditorium. And I was shocked in both cases to see that these films, and these were second-time Sundance directors, both of them, had no Asian American characters in the lead. In fact, in the entire movie, none. It was shocking to me. Because we have an opportunity, whether you're an artist or a business person or whatever, to start changing the landscape. And these guys had an opportunity. And it was even more shocking when I went to the talk back afterwards that one of these directors, and I'm not hating, they were good movies, they were well done, said, oh yeah, this movie is based on my family. This movie is based on my people. And that shit was set in Iowa with a bunch of white people living on a farm, okay? Like somehow it got translated over there. It's kind of like what Parry was saying. Like it's easy to do that and to go, well, I gotta follow the money, and if I want my work to be seen, I'm gonna have to make compromises. And my thing is, if you do have to make compromises, which we all do as Asian Americans, then you have to have, it's like yin and yang. You better balance that shit, okay? Like, I'll give you an example, and I don't always live up to this, you know, but I'm saying, like, right now I'm sitting here with you guys today doing this thing, and touring LA County right now is a play that I wrote for East West Players called Remixed, a multi-culti mashup for 2 actors, right? It's about the mixed race experience told from the Asian American point of view. That's touring, you know? So I feel like, okay, I have that out in the marketplace. If I go do an off-Broadway show where I'm playing a roller derby girl, which is the other thing I just did, who's based in a blonde wig, right? Which is what I just did. My mother was thrilled. My Asian cohorts were disturbed, and I thought it was rad, okay? But I'm just saying, like, we all have a responsibility to remember that we need to both put work out in the marketplace or represent in the marketplace in a way that uplifts Asian Americans and fucking support the people who do have the courage to put out a film like Better Luck Tomorrow where it's an all Asian American cast. When that film came out, I was there at the University of Michigan launch, and they told the story of how they tried to make it an all-white cast. And they had to change studios a bunch of times to keep it an Asian American cast. That took a lot of balls to say no to all that money to make that film, for Justin Lin to say no and keep the vision the same. And so I was imploring the kids that I was on tour visiting to go see the frickin' movie, you know? Or if I said to them, even if you don't go, buy a ticket and then walk away from the theater, but like send a message. So for us, branding is a very complex cultural sort of snafu that we're in because of our diversity. And so I guess unity and diversity is our brand at the moment, and we should be like unilaterally supporting each other.
I think that's a good person to transition to, because in terms of the trials and tribulations that it took to bring K-Town into reality, I mean, you were not only dealing with, I imagine, sort of industry, television industry network, skepticism or reluctance, but at the same time also kind of community pushback, which I know K-Town, you know, has gotten a lot of. I mean, succinctly, can you just talk a little bit about that experience and what it took to make K-Town a reality?
I mean, there are numerous reasons why I created this show, but probably the biggest was when I told my parents I was leaving home to move to LA to write and be in film. They asked me 2 questions. Number 1 is, how are you going to get paid? And the second question was, how do I explain what you do to my friends? And so it was indicative of how my parents and a lot of Asians buy into the model minority myth, the myth that there are good stereotypes. Because, you know, all stereotypes are bad. You know, it's to say I'm smart because I'm Asian is just as ignorant as saying someone is lazy because they're Mexican. Because both are preconceived notions of who you are as a race and not as an individual. And so it struck me that how much my parents were worried about the perception of what their peers thought, or even strangers, is this need to be perceived as being perfect. And so the reason why I did K-Town was because I wanted to kind of like smash those stereotypes. And I know the criticism that we get from the community is that we are creating these new negative stereotypes with the show, when in reality what I'm trying to do is we're showing that there is no type. And that, you know, yes, as Asians, we can be smart, we can play the piano, we can be good at math, but at the same time, we're also like sexy and have swagger and can party and can fuck up just like everybody else. You know, and so the more that we embrace the model minority myth, the more that reflects in mass media. And so that's so yeah.
about the subject of Linsanity is that, in that moment a year ago, which feels like 10 years ago in some ways, there was a sense that everything changes here, right? That his bigness, in essence, suddenly changes the game, to rip off the title of our panel. Now that we're a year later, to what extent is that actually true? Has anything shifted, do you think, by his presence, by his success in that moment? I mean, you obviously worked in the documentary, so I think you have a better insight on this than a lot of people. A year later, where can we evaluate what that impact has been?
Sure, I think certainly it's had impact, right, on the community. And, when you're talking about shattering stereotypes, he did go to Harvard, so that's, one stereotype there, but he's in a chosen profession that's not very Asian American, right? If he had that kind of success as a lawyer, doctor, whatever, accountant, whatever you want to be, that's not a story, right? There's plenty of successful people in other industries. He happened to find success at the highest level in a man's game in an African American world, right? So for him to have that, I think it shattered a lot of stereotypes. Impact, I mean, I think it's been a year later. I don't know. I think it's probably too early to tell what kind of impact it's had, but certainly I think, I know he's made it certainly a global impact, right, in terms of how people perceive themselves, and probably see more Asians on the basketball court. And I think even back to the whole Yao Ming example, that's 10 years ago when he came, right? There's basketball players now that were 8, 9, 10 years old when he started. So there's going to be a lot more, there's a downstream effect to that. So I think everybody, in this room, we all excel at different parts of our life, different professions. And, Jeremy just happened to excel in a very high-profile, heavily media-covered event and profession.
I wish I had time to have just an afternoon and ask you guys a dozen more questions, but I'm cognizant of time, and I want to see if there's anyone in the audience who has questions for any or all of our panelists here. Right here.
Hold on, let me get you a mic. So it seems like all of you have made various decisions about whether to incorporate your cultural identity into your work, and I'm curious about how that's helped or hurt you, and if it's helped you, does it go up to a ceiling, and if it's hurt you, do you keep doing it anyway?
Parry, you take it up now.
That was tough. I mean, what you were saying kind of like hit the nail on the head with me. The year after Better Luck Tomorrow, it's like I did this great progressive film for Asian Americans. I can't go back and revert. I'm going to try to turn down everything. And basically the year after Better Luck Tomorrow, I turned down anything that was remotely stereotypical or offensive or would make us as sort of Asian American cinema 2 steps back. And that year, I made $137 acting because I turned down everything. There was nothing, So that was kind of, devastating to me financially, but also mentally. Like, oh my gosh, I was the lead of this studio film. What happened? And I did one commercial the year afterwards where it was like I played a Dell assistant, and all I did was this. And then, but that was the only thing that was like non-offensive that I could, But at the same time, that hate mail was from you. But I did get a lot of discouraging hate mail saying, dude, look at this loser. All of a sudden you're in Better Luck Tomorrow, now you're in a Dell commercial. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I'm trying to do a solid here by not reverting things. But I would still get this hate mail. I'm like, I can't win either way here. And then I started realizing that I knew who I was. And I knew I had these sensibilities that I'm going to try to have that balance that you were saying, the compromise. There's going to have to be some compromise. And I knew that those Chinatown roles of when you're on CSI, like, hey, Chinatown happened, all the Asians come into audition. I said, I need to get all of those roles because I at least am empowered. At this point, I had been acting for about like 9 years or so, and I wasn't afraid of, you know, quote unquote, like being fired or being able to like speak up on set. A good example is this movie called Hatchet that I did, where the joke was this guy who's had this Louisiana Bayou accent. You know, hey, y'all tried the crawfish yet? And then when the monster, it's a horror movie, comes after us, all of a sudden I break into an Asian accent, like he's a con artist, you know? And I was like, I get it, but at the same time I said, how about we milk this joke for one more beat, and when the shit really hits the fan, I drop the Asian accent and I just talk normally the way I do. So it's consistent that he's a con artist, but at the same time I said I have a problem doing the whole thing as the joke of him being an Asian accent, and it's more, this way the comedy's more about him being a con artist. And all of a sudden, I mean, the director didn't write this role because of out of malice. He just thought it would be funny because it's what he saw in other films, you know? But at the same time, if you had a first-year actor getting that role, he'd probably be like, oh, I'm just happy to be here. I'll do whatever you want me to do. So I said, that role is going to be cast no matter what. I need to get that out of the hands of someone who's not thinking about that and just happy to say, hey, I'm just paying my dues, you know? So that's kind of how I've had my career from then on, and have that compromise. There's some things that have been like unsalvageable. Those things I turned down. Where I'm like, there's nothing I can do with this. So.
Anyone else in the panel want to take this on?
I was going to say, I think that should be applauded because, you know, most people would sell out and take those roles, right? Because they want to work and they want to do that. I mean, I think the most dangerous thing that I see from a production standpoint, a lot of people play victim too, right? And I think that is very, very dangerous, you know. Nobody's reading my script because, you know, I'm Asian. Well, maybe your script sucks, you know, right? Ever thought of that? Right, so, I mean, there's obviously success cases on the panel, there's success cases in the audience. I mean, people have to break stereotypes, right? And, you know, Ted talked about being Generation 2. I don't know if it's Generation 1.5 or Generation 2, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I think we have to deal with that in the certain time frame, but I think we can slowly grow out of that. So the more people like Parry that are turning down those roles, they're going to stop writing those roles, right? So I think that should be.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this applies to every aspect of your life, because if you're committed to something, especially when you're talking about the Asian American sort of viewpoint and perspective, I can tell you this: I could make much more money and work way less than I do right now, right? Because it's hard. Building businesses are hard. In my other job, I run a cable network called MNet, English Language Asian Pop Culture. So it's really hard to build these things. There's so much blocking and tackling involved. And really, going back to what you're hearing on this panel, is really, it's hard to bring people together to do something, to act, to engage, to get people excited about moving. It's really hard to do these things. So what we're asking is that as you approach this, you got to keep an open mind. If you don't agree with K-Town, that's okay, you know, but just come to it. You got to watch it. You got to understand what that is and what that represents. So I would just encourage everybody, you know, if it's important to you, if you're passionate about going out there and making sure that Asian Americans have a voice out there, you're going to make some sacrifices. But you know what? If that's where your heart is, you got to do it.
I just want to make a quick observation that jumped out at me listening to you guys talk throughout the panel, is that how so many of your individual stories were defined not by sort of a constant string of successes, but really began with some kind of failure of sorts, right? Being laid off, like doing poorly in school, something along those lines. And it's pretty remarkable that I think what, you know, ends up propelling you is not, again, an unending string of overachievement, but rather some kind of you know, obstacle in essence, that in overcoming that sort of leads to these other things too. So the idea that we always have to be winning is not just unrealistic, but perhaps is not the way to think about it. Anyways, back to the audience. Other questions we have? Anyone on the side? Right here.
Yeah, I had a question. This was more directed towards Jay. We're talking with Chris about culturally the impact of Jeremy Lin in the story, and it might be kind of early, but I was interested in Jay's thoughts, especially since you really dwell in that realm at Grantland of culture and sports and all that kind of coming together. Did you have a particular take on the the impact, at least the early impact of the Jeremy Lin story on culture and so forth?
It was very exciting. I think like it was an exciting time for me, and I think for all Asian people. And I just think that it was the first time where like there was, I think it had to happen within the realm of sports almost, because there's like a visible product where people can sort of prove their, and with Asian males, it's always like sort of these physical deficits that are the problem. And and there's also like numbers attached, so you can say like he scored 28 points or something like that. And that it was the first time that people were able to build sort of a language where you could talk about being equal in a way that most people don't like to talk, like in sort of a realm that you don't want to talk about usually. I don't know. This isn't making any sense to me. But like so by him sort of coming on unexpectedly like that, I think that it allowed people to like be proud for like however long, like 3 months or something like that. And I think everybody was very proud of him. And I don't know if it had any lasting impact. Like I do think I guess he's still playing, which is like 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 if it was a movie he would never play again, but he's still playing, and I guess there's still chapters that can be written about his story. But yeah, I do think that it sort of made a language that now I think there's just a lot more vocal Asian people out there, and I think that it just happened because everybody needed to talk about what was happening because it was so unbelievable.
I want to say something too. Coming from my branding / performance art / student advocate point of view, the impact of Jeremy Lin is very intensely and personally and viscerally felt in the work that I do, again, with college students, which is probably the most important work that I do. And that, I want to say, is even if he had only played one season, the impact would go forever and ever, because it's about building the Asian American brand. And a brand, like I said, it's how we feel about ourselves internally and what messages we send, but it's also how you are perceived in the marketplace. And the impact directly on that is that all the Asian Americans who are growing up right now in America are experiencing what we call biculturalism, where they are sort of very aware of their responsibilities culturally as an Asian person, and also there's a lot of pressure from the American side. And even though Maxine Hong Kingston wrote Woman Warrior 40 years ago, those same issues she's talking about are happening right here, right now, today. And up to when Jeremy Lin started playing and a few other people busted out into pop culture, I would ask every year since about the year 2000 when I started touring, who are your role models, right? I would ask that to all the Asian American kids. And they would say Bruce Lee, my mom, and maybe Tia Carrera if they were really reaching, okay? So the fact that those kids have Jeremy Lin to add to the list, and I swear to God, I bet if I went to any college in America right now and asked those kids to name Asian American role models, he would be right up there. A lack of role models in a culture causes a sort of internalized depression that is measurable only in things like the rate of drug use in the West Coast, the suicide rate amongst Asian American college students. These things are real societal problems that come out of something as academic as representation in the media. And that's a really important point. Like, we talk about these things like, oh, like the media representation and the stereotypes, and what is the warrior image versus the sex blah blah worker image and blah. Okay, that's all great, and we can write a thesis about it, and we can blog about it, we can think about it, but the reality is that every year that I talk, and I'm telling you this is a truth, every year that I interview Asian American students about their lives, if we get deep, I hear at least one suicide attempt story. Because the pressure is too much to fit into America, and nobody recognizes them as a real American because there are no pictures of Asians out there in culture and sports and music and the things that we take our information from. And then the pressure at home to stay unassimilated is too big, and then people don't know what to do and they want to kill themselves. So Jeremy Lin is saving lives.
I think first, to respond to Jay, there is a movie, and hopefully it plays for a long time. we were at Sundance Film Festival. That was our world premiere. And I can tell you that we were rushing to the finish line, right? Because when Linsanity happened in February, we had, I think, an important point to point out is that we started this story while he was at Harvard, right? He was making impact already on Asian American culture. What do we think we would do with it? No idea. Throw it up on the web, you know, Asian Americans over-index on YouTube, throw it out there, see what sponsor is gonna, you know, back something like that. Do we know he's gonna make it in the NBA? No. Was Linsanity even a word at that point? No, right? So, but when Linsanity happened, obviously it was a paramount moment, and I think, like I was saying before, it remains to be seen what kind of impact it had, but we were racing to the finish line to even make the Sundance submission. And we actually hand-carried the tape to the festival. We were working on it that late. And the first audience, and every audience thereafter, standing ovations, people laughing, crying, cheering, when they knew that he hit the shot, right? So I think, I think the most satisfying thing for us from the filmmaking team was that we knew that it was going to speak to Asian Americans. We knew that it was going to be impactful to that. How does it reach out further than that? And when you have middle-aged white women coming up, hey, thank you for telling that story. Older black men saying like, wow, that was really inspiring. That was most satisfying to us, right? Because you've kind of crossed that over. So, you know, I think Jeremy has, I mean, like I said, I think there's going to be more documentaries, more books written on him and that type of thing once his career is over. And this was just, you know, up till Linsanity. So it was a point in time.
So when he gets transferred to the Kings is what you're saying. All right, last question.
Two events in my life that I'm always going to remember was Hideo Nomo.
Yeah.
My uncle had tears in his eyes because he never thought he would see a Dodger pitcher that looked like me. Second is the first time in history that Jeremy Lin did was someone belittled an Asian and they got fired. And that was the greatest thing because everybody, the blacks had, you couldn't do that to a black, belittle a black, you couldn't belittle a Hispanic, but we were their doormats. You could belittle the Asians all the time, but finally someone got fired.
I forgot about that, yeah.
I just want to add, though, you can belittle all those people not get fired. That happens every day, but I understand your point. Anyone want to sort of respond to?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the ESPN. Right, so for those of you guys who don't know, there was an ESPN headline. Jeremy, I think, had won 8 straight games. Jeremy led Knicks, had won 8 straight games, and their loss was against New Orleans Hornets. And the headline was, is there a chink in the armor, right? And that person did get fired. We addressed that in the film. You know, I think to speak to Jeremy's character, I don't know how many people knew this, but he actually took the guy out to eat, talked about it, educated him on why this was bad, why this is wrong, why this was offensive, and, you know, left it at that. So he held no grudges, and, you know, that speaks to who he is, and I think obviously he can be used as an example because, you know, we all experience, let's face it, racism exists, right? Racism is a very real thing in our lives, and, you know, how do you combat that? You have to be stronger, you have to overcome. So I think that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
I guess I should address this as a ESPN employee. But
Yeah.
I sort of disagree with you. Like, I don't think that was a great moment. Like, I do remember, like, I woke up at 2 a.m. and I saw everybody on Twitter was really bugging out, and I was like, what is this? And then I was like, this is like, all right, whatever. Like, this is crazy. I can't believe that I work for this company. And, but, you know, it did seem, I guess, like, when you're doing things and it's almost symbolic where, like, this guy has built up enough cachet at the network where they have to do something, and that's the only reason they do something. Like, I feel like it seemed a little bit hollow to me. Like, I did write something about it at the time, and I remember it being, like, I was angry, I think, just like everybody else, and it was embarrassing to say that I work for the company and not quit. But it also seemed like the more that you sort of looked at it, it was like an honest mistake, and like the guy made a mistake. Like I work at ESPN.com. I understand how things go up online without almost any oversight. Like I could literally go on the front. There was a while where I could go on the front page of, like, if you went to ESPN.com for like 1 minute, I could put like "fuck you, John Skipper."
Yeah.
I quit. And it
Turn
would
the
be up
cameras
there
off.
because there's no oversight. And so this kid is like, it's 2 a.m. and he's, I'm not meaning to apologize for him, but to sort of like count that as some sort of huge victory seems a little bit silly to me. I'm sure. I mean,
what I'll say, right? I think the important point to take away from this, though, is I hear what Jay's saying, right? It may or may not have been an honest mistake. We don't know. We're not in the guy's head. But the fact that he didn't realize that was culturally sensitive, right, is, you can't say the N-word. You wouldn't put the N-word as a headline, right? We understand that's sensitive. The general population may or may not understand that that's a sensitive word to us, right? So I think that I think the victory in that was that it brought it to light. Not that nobody wants to get fired, right? I don't think the guy had any malicious intent. And again, I can't get into his head. But the point was made, and I think everybody at ESPN probably had some cultural sensitivity training, right? Right. Right.
Adam Carolla didn't get fired 4 years before that for saying ching chong, ching chong, ching chong on the radio into a national audience, lampooning the Asian American Excellence Awards. Rosie O'Donnell did not get fired for being on The View and saying that people in China talk like this, ting tong, ching chong, ting tong, The View. So it was important that somebody get fired for something and that it catch national media attention so that the message went out to say, listen, this is not part of our brand.
So I want to thank the panel. I want to thank all you guys for coming out.
All right, so I get that. Here's the thing. I think that we have had a tremendous day today. We've had some incredible people talking about some really, really raw and real things. I am so thankful that everybody has come out and just opened up about things which I think all too often we talk about in dorm rooms, we talk about in Twitter, we talk about in our the privacy of our social networks. Not that there's really any privacy anymore. But there's something about being in real space and engaging like this and seeing face-to-face people who you may only have heard or been friends with on Facebook, right? That is really important. I also think, frankly, that you guys coming out here on a day like this, a beautiful day like this, to engage with these amazing people is amazing in and of itself. So please give yourselves a huge round of applause.
You used to feel like you didn't feel it, like, oh my God, I lost 40% of my own in the world.
I want to do two things. We are going to actually not have the full town hall. We're way out over time right now. But what we do have is alcohol. And hopefully music and more direct interaction in the great hallways across the way for our reception. It is going to be our official kickoff launch party on the West Coast for Shatter. But it's also going to be a thank you to all of you guys for being here and being a part of this. And we'll all be there and all able to talk and interact face-to-face and for reals. I hope this is not the last time we do this. I hope we do this elsewhere with other people, with you guys too,
Yeah,
and I hope that you guys all took something away
when
from
Party
this.
Poker was around?
I want to thank Jana. I want to thank NYU APA Institute. I want to thank all of our panelists and all of our moderators and all of our volunteers who were incredible. Incredible. Alexander Clifton, Koji Sakai, Junta Goda, and of course my partners in all this, the guys from the SIU Universe team, Keith Chow, Jerry Ma, Parry Shen, great stories to tell. You'll hear a little more from us on the other side of the building, but for now, thank you. Have a great night, and join us over there for a drink.
Yay! That was great.
I always want to explain that, but it's so much money.
Yeah,
let's talk.
Yeah, I'll get that thing and I'll okay.
We are. Okay, good.
Yeah. Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Benson, thanks for coming through.
Hey, thanks for I didn't actually want to take a listen to it. Oh, yeah. It's a real pleasure to meet you. This was a kind of special. So I'm just really glad to be back.